It began with a map. I found it tucked inside my grandfather's old leather-bound journal, buried beneath a stack of moth-eaten quilts in the attic. The journal smelled of dust and time, its pages yellowed and fragile. Written in his neat, deliberate handwriting on the inside cover was a single phrase that sent a chill down my spine. The Whispering Stones of Red Hollow. My grandfather, Elijah Carter, wasn't the type for flights of fancy. He was a practical man, a veteran and a carpenter, who spoke more with his hands than his words. I only ever saw him once after he left our home in Ohio. He came back for my mother's funeral, silent and stoic. He didn't stay long. His letters stopped soon after that. I always figured he just wanted to be alone. Turns out he ended up in a place called Red Hollow. I couldn't find Red Hollow on any modern map. It was an old mining town, tucked deep into the hills of West Virginia, a place forgotten by time. The journal described it in careful, vivid detail. A town with a single stretch of Main Street, a diner with a flickering neon sign, and a church whose bell rang every Sunday whether anyone showed up or not. A place where whispers echoed from the red stone cliffs that loomed over the valley. I packed a bag and left that same night. The road twisted and turned through the mountains, the pavement giving way to dirt and gravel long before I reached the town limits. The trees closed in around me, thick and tangled, their bare branches clawing at the sky. It felt like driving into a place that didn't want to be found. The welcome sign was barely readable. Welcome to Red Hollow, EST 1847. The paint faded and peeling. Beyond it, the town was exactly as my grandfather had described. Quiet. Still. Like it had been frozen in time. The gas station was closed, but the general store's windows glowed warm against the encroaching dusk. A rusty bell jingled when I pushed the door open, and the scent of old wood and coffee hit me. Behind the counter stood a wiry man, his flannel shirt rolled up to his elbows, revealing arms like twisted rope. He looked up from his newspaper, eyes narrowing beneath bushy brows. "Don't get many strangers out this way," he said, voice gravelly and low. "I'm looking for Red Hollow," I replied, unsure how to start. He snorted. "Well, you found it, though I can't say why you'd want to." I hesitated, then reached into my bag and pulled out the journal. My grandfather lived here. Elijah Carter. The man's face changed. His mouth tightened into a hard line, and his eyes flickered to the journal like it was something dangerous. "Elijah Carter," he repeated slowly, like the name carried weight. He studied me for a long moment. "You're his kin, huh? Guess that makes sense. You've got his eyes." I swallowed hard. "Did you know him?" Everyone in Red Hollow knew Elijah. He came here looking for something too. The man glanced at the door, as if checking to make sure we were alone. "He found it. Or maybe it found him." "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned forward, voice dropping low. "Listen, son. There's things up in those hills best left alone. Your granddaddy went up to the hollow. Ain't nobody goes up there now. Not anymore." "Why not?" He stared at me for a beat longer before exhaling sharply. "They say the rocks talk to you. Say things you ain't supposed to hear." The bell above the door jingled again, and the man straightened quickly, his expression shuddered. An older woman entered, her face lined and weathered by years of hard living. She gave me a curious look but didn't speak. The man nodded at me, his voice louder now. "If you're staying the night, try the old boarding house down the road. Miss Evelyn runs it. She'll set you up." I wanted to press him for more, but the moment was gone. He turned his attention to the woman and started ringing up her groceries like our conversation had never happened. I left the store feeling unsettled. The wind had picked up, tugging at my jacket as the sky darkened to a dusky purple. The streetlights flickered to life, casting pools of yellowed light onto the cracked pavement. I spotted the boarding house, a sagging Victorian with peeling paint and a crooked sign that read Evelyn's Rooms. Miss Evelyn was a small woman, hunched and wiry, with hair piled high in a way that reminded me of a church lady from another era. She didn't ask many questions, just handed me a key and told me not to wander after dark. My room was small but clean, the quilt on the bed handmade. I sat on the edge, flipping through my grandfather's journal by the light of the bedside lamp. His words painted a picture of Red Hollow that didn't match the quiet, empty streets I'd seen. He wrote about voices that called from the rocks, about a cavern hidden beyond the cliffs where the air smelled like desert winds and ancient sand. One entry stood out, written in shakier handwriting than the rest. The whispering grows louder. I see her now, the woman in the shadows. She watches me from the red stone. I think she knows my name. I shivered. The room suddenly felt colder. The wind outside picked up again, rattling the window. For a second, just a second, I swore I heard something beneath it. A whisper. It sounded like my name. Sleep didn't come easy that night. The old boarding house creaked and groaned like it was alive, the wind outside rattling against the window panes. Every time I drifted close to sleep, I woke with a start, heart hammering, sure I'd heard my name whispered from somewhere just beyond the door. By the time the first light of dawn seeped through the curtains, I'd given up on rest. I dressed quickly, grabbed my grandfather's journal, and headed downstairs. Miss Evelyn was in the kitchen, humming an old hymn as she stirred a pot of something on the stove. The smell of coffee and bacon filled the air, but I wasn't hungry. She glanced up as I entered. "Morning, dear. You look like you've seen a ghost." "Didn't sleep much," I admitted. My voice felt raw, like I hadn't spoken in days. She gave a knowing nod. "It's the air here. Gets into your bones." I hesitated. "Miss Evelyn, did you know my grandfather?" "Elijah Carter?" Her hand stilled on the spoon. For a moment, she didn't say anything, just stared into the pot like it held answers. Then she sighed. "Everyone knew Elijah. He was a good man, but he couldn't leave well enough alone." "What do you mean?" I pressed. She set the spoon down carefully. "Red Hollow's got a history. Some call it a curse. Others say it's a blessing, but those folks don't tend to last long." Her eyes found mine, sharp and serious. "The Hollow calls to people. Your grandfather heard it louder than most." "Did he ever mention the whispers?" I asked, voice low. Her face went pale. "He wouldn't talk about it. Not directly. But I know he went up to the cliffs more than once. Came back different every time. Last time he didn't come back at all." A chill crept down my spine. I swallowed hard. "I'm going up there." Miss Evelyn stared at me like I'd just told her I planned to dance on my own grave. "Don't," she said softly. "Whatever's up there, it's not meant for the living." I didn't answer. I couldn't. Something inside me wouldn't let go of the pull, the same pull I realized that had probably dragged my grandfather up into the hollow all those years ago. The path started behind the old churchyard, just like the journal described. The morning fog clung to the ground, swirling around my ankles as I walked. The trees felt closer than they should have, their branches reaching inwards, closing me off from the world. There wasn't a sound, no birds, no wind, nothing but the crunch of dead leaves beneath my boots. I followed the trail uphill, past the rusted skeleton of an old mining cart and a half-collapsed shack. The journal mentioned landmarks like these. I checked and rechecked the map my grandfather had drawn, the lines shaky but precise. Then the path ended, or it should have. Ahead of me, carved into the mountainside, was an opening, narrow and dark, barely visible beneath a tangle of thorned vines. It wasn't marked on the map, but somehow I knew it was where I needed to go. The air changed the moment I stepped inside. It was warmer, dry, like the air you feel before a thunderstorm. The walls of the tunnel weren't rough like I expected. They were smooth, polished, covered in carvings. Not words, but symbols, spirals, eyes, faces hollow and staring. They reminded me of the petroglyphs I'd seen in history books, but older, more desperate. My flashlight flickered. I smacked it against my palm, and the beam steadied. That's when I heard it again. The whispering. It wasn't wind. It wasn't echoes. It was voices, layered and overlapping, too faint to make out but too close to ignore. I moved forward, heart pounding. The tunnel sloped downwards, twisting and turning like a coiled snake. The carvings became more elaborate the deeper I went, scenes of people gathered around a figure, kneeling in worship. Their faces were carved with awe and fear. The figure at the center wasn't human. Tall, shrouded, with hollow eyes and outstretched arms. The longer I looked at it, the harder it was to breathe. The whispers grew louder. I stumbled into an open chamber, my flashlight's beam catching the edges of the room. It wasn't natural. The walls were too smooth, too perfect. In the center stood a pedestal, and on it rested a stone rose. It was carved from the same red rock as the cliffs outside, delicate and intricate. It looked like it should crumble to dust at the slightest touch. My grandfather had described it in his journal. The rose waits for the one who hears the whispers. It holds the truth of the hollow. I reached for it, and the whispers stopped. The silence hit me like a punch to the chest. My ears rang from the absence of sound. And then, from the shadows, she stepped forward. I couldn't see her face. It was hidden beneath a hood, her form draped in dark, flowing fabric that seemed to shimmer even in the dim light. But I knew, deep in my gut, that she was the woman my grandfather had written about. The woman in the stone. She raised a hand, and though I couldn't see her eyes, I felt her gaze lock onto mine. "Carter," she said, "not my name, but my family's." The word echoed, not just in the chamber, but in my head. "You should not be here." I couldn't speak. My throat tightened, my voice stolen. I tried to step back, but my legs wouldn't move. "I waited for him," she continued, her voice low and melodic, like the wind through dry leaves. "He chose to leave. But you came to listen." I didn't know what to say, didn't know if I could. My heart slammed against my ribs as she stepped closer. The air rippled around her. "I can show you," she said softly. "I can show you what he saw, what he feared, what he loved." The stone rose burned cold in my hand. "Do you want to know?" she asked. The whispering returned, louder than before, swirling around me. 100 voices. 1,000. And all of them wanted me to say yes. I swallowed hard. Yes. The moment the word left my mouth, the chamber shifted. The air thickened, pressing against me like a living thing. The woman in the shadows, if she was a woman at all, didn't move, but I felt her presence spread, filling the room, stretching into the corners where the light couldn't reach. The whispers grew frantic, swirling faster around me until they blurred into a single, rising hum. Then silence. It wasn't normal silence. It was the kind that smothers everything, making the world feel hollow and wrong. My ears rang from the sudden emptiness. The woman raised her hand again, and I felt my knees buckle. I wasn't falling, I was sinking. The chamber dissolved. The stone walls melted into a haze of red and gold. I wasn't standing in the cave anymore. I was somewhere else. It was a desert. The sky overhead blazed an unnatural shade of orange, and the sand beneath my feet wasn't like any sand I'd ever seen. It glittered, pale and glassy, stretching out to an endless horizon. The wind was hot, but it carried no sound. No life. Only the faintest scent of dust and dry roses. The woman was there, standing on a distant ridge. She looked smaller now, less like a figure of shadow and more like a lone traveler wrapped in a dark cloak. I tried to call out to her, but my voice didn't come. My throat was dry and raw. The ground trembled. From the sand, structures began to rise, ancient buildings carved from the same red stone as the cliffs of Red Hollow. They erupted in slow, deliberate movements, towering above me. An entire city formed around me, born from the desert itself. The buildings were beautiful, covered in swirling patterns and symbols like the ones I'd seen in the tunnel. They looked like they had been asleep, waiting for someone to wake them. Petra. I didn't know how I knew, but I did. This was Petra, not the one in Jordan, not the one tourists wandered through with cameras and water bottles. This was the Petra from the stories, from my grandfather's journal. The one that wasn't meant to exist. The woman's voice reached me, though her lips never moved. It came from everywhere and nowhere all at once. He saw this too. My grandfather, Elijah. He had stood here. He had seen the city. The weight of that realization hit me like a hammer. He wasn't chasing legends, he had found something real. Something impossible. What happened to him? I managed to rasp out, though my voice felt foreign and distant. The woman tilted her head. He chose. Chose what? She didn't answer. Instead, the city shifted again. The red stone towers darkened, shadows crawling up their sides like ink in water. The wind changed. It wasn't warm anymore. It was cold, biting, carrying a sound that made my stomach twist. The screams. They rose from the depths of the city. Distant at first, then closer. The buildings seemed to pulse and breathe as the shadows bled down their walls, spilling into the streets like smoke. Figures emerged from the darkness, moving strangely, stumbling, twisting. They weren't human. Their shapes were wrong, too thin, too angular, like broken puppets. Their faces were hollow, with empty pits where eyes should have been. They moved in jerks and starts, dragged forward by something I couldn't see. The whispers returned, louder than ever. Join us. I staggered back. The figures turned toward me, their heads snapping unnaturally fast. One of them opened its mouth, but no sound came out. Only more whispers, pouring from its throat like smoke. My chest tightened. My lungs burned. I couldn't breathe. The woman watched. She didn't move to stop them. Why are you showing me this? I gasped, my voice barely a ragged croak. Because you came to listen, she answered softly. Just like him. The shadows surged closer. I could see their faces now, not hollow, but familiar. One looked like the man from the general store. Another had Miss Evelyn's eyes. Their features twisted and warped, but the resemblance was there. Red Hollow. These were its people. What happened to them? I choked out. They heard the truth, the woman said. The hollow keeps its own. The shapes lunged. The world snapped back. I hit the ground hard, the cold stone of the chamber biting into my palms. My lungs screamed as I gasped for air, my throat raw and burning. The woman was gone. The pedestal was empty. The stone rose vanished. The only sound was my own ragged breathing. I didn't know how long I lay there. Minutes. Hours. Eventually, I forced myself to stand. My legs felt like they weren't mine. I stumbled out of the chamber, back through the tunnel, barely noticing the carvings this time. The whispers were gone. The sun was low in the sky by the time I emerged from the cave. Red hollows stretched out below me, quiet and still. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the smell of pine and cold earth. It smelled wrong. I made my way back to town on autopilot. My mind felt detached, like it was floating a few steps behind me. When I reached the boarding house, the lights were on. Miss Evelyn was there, sitting on the porch. She looked up as I approached. You found it, didn't you? She asked softly. I couldn't answer. I didn't need to. She saw it in my face. She sighed, her shoulders sagging. Your grandfather came back the first time too, but he didn't stay. My throat tightened. What happened to him? She didn't speak for a long moment. When she finally did, her voice was barely a whisper. He heard the whispers again. The wind picked up, carrying the sound of rustling leaves and something else. Something softer, fainter. A voice. A whisper. It sounded like my name. The whisper didn't stop. It followed me through the night. No matter how tightly I shut the windows or how deep I buried my head under the blankets, I could still hear it, soft, persistent, weaving through the creaks of the old boarding house like smoke through a keyhole. I didn't sleep. Not really. When the first light of dawn crept over the hills, I was already dressed and ready to go. My grandfather's journal sat heavy in my pack, the pages worn and smudged from where I'd gripped it too tightly. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay. Miss Evelyn was waiting on the porch. She looked like she hadn't slept either, her eyes shadowed and sunken.
She didn't try to stop me.
Be careful, she said quietly. The hollow doesn't let go easy. I nodded, though I wasn't sure what that meant anymore. The town was too quiet. Red Hollow always felt old, like it was stuck between decades, but now it felt wrong. The streets were empty. No sound but the wind. It was like the whole town was holding its breath, waiting. I made it to the churchyard before I saw him. He stood at the edge of the trees, just beyond the old gravestones. His back was to me, but I knew him instantly, even after all these years. The slope of his shoulders. The old brown coat he always wore. My voice caught in my throat. Grandpa. He didn't move. I stepped forward, heart pounding. The air felt heavy, thick, like I was moving through water. My boots crunched on dead leaves. He still didn't turn. Grandpa, it's me, I said, louder this time. My voice sounded small in the empty yard. It's Carter. Slowly his head tilted. Not all the way, just enough for me to see the side of his face. His skin was pale, too pale. His eyes weren't his eyes. They were black, hollow, like the figures in the cave. The whisper came again, louder this time. Join us. I stumbled back, my chest tightening. My grandfather moved then, slow and jerky, like his body didn't quite remember how to work. His head twitched to the side, too fast, too sharp. I ran. I didn't think, I just ran. My feet pounded against the dirt road, lungs burning. I didn't know where I was going. The trees blurred past me, branches clawing at my face and arms. The whisper didn't stop. It was in my head now, wrapping around my thoughts. He chose. You can too. I didn't stop until I reached the cliffs. The wind screamed around me, tearing at my clothes. The drop stretched below, jagged rocks and red stone, far enough down that I couldn't see the bottom. My grandfather's journal was still clutched in my hand. The pages fluttered wildly, threatening to tear away. I felt him before I heard him. He was behind me. I didn't turn around. Carter. It wasn't his voice. Not really. It was close enough to twist something deep in my chest, though. I squeezed my eyes shut. You left, I said, my voice shaking. You left us. Why? The whisper eased, softening, like it was coaxing me closer. I didn't leave. I found it. The truth. The hollow showed me. I opened my eyes, staring at the drop below. The wind tugged at me, urging me forward. My feet edged closer, gravel slipping beneath my heels. You don't have to be afraid, the voice said. You can see it too. You can stay. My throat burned. My chest ached. I wanted to believe him, wanted to believe it was really him. But I remembered the journal. The last thing he wrote, scrawled and desperate. The hollow doesn't give. It takes. I swallowed hard. My voice came out broken. You're not him. The whisper twisted, rising to a roar. The wind howled, and I felt the ground shift beneath me. A hand, ice cold, closed around my wrist. Carter, the voice rasped. Don't go. I turned. His face wasn't his anymore. The hollow eyes, the sunken skin. It was him and not him, all at once. His hand tightened, bone-white fingers digging into my wrist. Stay, he whispered. Something snapped inside me. A surge of something hot and furious burned through the fear. My free hand shot up, the journal still clutched tight. I didn't think. I just swung. The book connected with his face, hard. He staggered back, the shadows around him flickering like smoke. His grip loosened. I wrenched my arm free and stumbled back. The wind roared louder, deafening now. The ground beneath him cracked. Carter, he screamed. This time it almost sounded like him. Like my grandfather. For a second I almost believed it. Then the ground gave way. He fell without a sound, vanishing into the red mist below. The wind stopped. The world went quiet again, unnervingly still. My knees buckled, and I sank to the ground, trembling. The journal slipped from my fingers, falling open beside me. The last page was different now. The scrawled warning was gone. In its place, a single line of neat, familiar handwriting. You found me. Don't come back. Tears blurred my vision. I sat there until the sun climbed high over the cliffs, warming the cold from my skin. The wind picked up again, gentle this time, carrying the faintest scent of dry roses. I didn't look back when I finally made my way down the trail. Red Hollow was quiet when I returned. The streets were still empty. Miss Evelyn was gone. The boarding house door was shut and locked, like no one had ever been there. The town felt thinner, somehow.
Hollow.
I didn't stay. I left the journal on the porch steps. The last thing I heard before I drove out of Red Hollow was the wind whispering through the trees.
It almost sounded like my name.